Now, I've said this once, but I'll say it again, but Jane Fonda is by far one of the most insufferable actresses out there within the film industry, within Hollywood, and for multiple reasons why. The biggest reason of all is the fact that she is very much politically motivated when it comes to promoting her films or promoting her own self as an actress, and how she just keeps on hopping on the anti-Trump bandwagon and really just calling out a lot of other actresses for not following her politics, or a lot of those within the general public for not following her politics, and saying that you're uneducated for this, and that. It gets very exhausting when it comes to Jane Fonda. However, at the center of all of this, we know that Sydney Sweeney, alright, actress Sydney Sweeney, is, of course, getting openly attacked by a lot of Hollywood celebrities out there, wrongfully so, by the way. Ruby Rose was one example, and among others, and lately now Jane Fonda even had a couple of things to say about Sydney Sweeney, just weeks after her Charlie Kirk-related comments backfired for Jane Fonda. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, the thing that's going on right now within the media, within Hollywood, within the music industry is I think that there's a lot of those out there that are just very jealous about Sydney Sweeney. They're very jealous about her success, especially after her jeans commercial. We all remember that whole thing a couple of months back. And now there's more controversy. There's more things stirring up around Sydney Sweeney because of her movie Christy really not doing all that hot at the box office. And look, it's not Sydney's fault per se. It's just that there wasn't that much of a turnout, right? So when you're looking at things like this, a lot of actresses like Ruby Rose and now Jane Fonda are using that as a way to attack Sydney Sweeney. Let's get into it. Now, with many Hollywood actors and actresses doubling down on their political agendas that they force onto the public and how they backfire on their careers, one major development going on now involves more to do with Jane Fonda, who had this to say about Sydney Sweeney. However, now she already started attacking her, where she delivered the following to the world. As a woman who has lived through multiple generations and looking at the Hollywood culture right now, I do believe that there is a lot of unfairness going on right now in this industry where actresses are being overly sexualized. If I take one look at, let's say Sydney Sweeney, let's be real here, not a very good actress. They are all supporting her only for her looks and in specific places that I don't think I need to lay out. But something about her just rubs me the wrong way, where she acts clueless to why she's getting roles in Hollywood, and it comes off acting like an entitled brat, and that doesn't get your place in Hollywood. And I think that's why her film struggled. Both men and women were expecting her looks, and they just didn't get that in Christy. So I think her career is done if she continues to lie to herself on how she got so popular in this industry, and believe me, it is a very controlled and calculated industry that not so many can survive in financially. When I take one look at Sydney Sweeney, it's a reminder of how weak men really are when it involves a woman's looks and her appearance on screen. Now guys, let me just stop there about what Jane Fonda is spewing. I think that there's a lot of jealousy coming from Jane Fonda. That's what it sounds like to me. And look, we know that regardless of what is going on right now with the Christy movie not doing too well at the box office, I don't think that really translates to anything to do with Sydney Sweeney, like I stated earlier in this video. I think it just has a lot to do with the fact that people had a disinterest in that movie in particular, and there wasn't as much of a turnout as expected by the studio. Now, we know one thing about Sydney Sweeney is that, yes, she did have a lot of issues with the past film, with Sony's Madam Web. That was another box office failure, a very big box office failure, and wasn't so good for Dakota Johnson's acting career either. But we know one thing about this, is that when it comes to actors and actresses, do they not remember that all actors and actresses have box office failures on and off throughout their career? This is just a natural rhythm, and this could very well be a natural bump in the road for Sydney Sweeney. Let's be real about this. She goes on to continue, Jane Fonda goes on to continue, when I was young, she says, I didn't have to do what Sydney was doing in Euphoria. That is just a cheap move to grab men's attention to gain success, and it worked for her, I guess, but not in the way that she was expecting. The thing about Sydney now is that she is essentially typecast as the all-American girl, and that can only go so far. We need to stop over-sexualizing women in this industry. We all need to stop worshipping the women that consider themselves at the top of the chain of attractiveness, because there is no talent there. When you are at the status, you are in an empty shell. And it's something that we need to fix in Hollywood. We have way too many up-and-comers that utilize their looks strictly above their acting skills and merit. And I think I really have to agree with what Ruby Rose had to say about Sydney Sweeney. She really did ruin it for Christy as a film. That was meant for someone else. Now, guys, let me stop there about what Jane Fonda is going on about. Again, the fact that she agrees with what Ruby Rose said, I think is putting her in a worse position than before. I think that it's only making her look more like a fool, to be honest, but let's move on. Perhaps someone, she says, more genuine for the role that doesn't rely on her own looks would have worked better. As actors, we need to accept that criticism will come our way for sure. And the way she responds, I feel, is not only disingenuous, but it's passive-aggressive behavior to the critics. And I think it's very telling of who Sydney Sweeney is. Our industry needs a makeover, because ever since Donald Trump came into office and came back into the White House, they have been worshipping Sydney Sweeney day in and day out by turning her into a MAGA, when in reality nobody knows where she stands on politics. The Trump administration needs to cut out their obsession with Sydney Sweeney. So, look, it's one thing for Jane Fonda to heavily criticize Sydney Sweeney's looks, her appearance, her box office, performance with Christy, which isn't looking too good right now. Who knows, maybe things will actually change when it arrives on streaming, but it's another thing for her to drag Trump and the White House and his administration into the conversation about Sydney Sweeney. I don't know what's wrong with Jane Fonda, but she definitely has a screw loose, and she's definitely had a screw loose since Vietnam and the whole Hanoi Jane thing. But we know one thing about Jane Fonda right now is that this is coming in the midst of her trying to make her acting comeback well into her 80s, and it's not working because a lot of studios are just abandoning ship. Quite frankly, a lot of studios are abandoning ship from specific actors. Actors like Robert De Niro, George Clooney, Julia Roberts, Jane Fonda here, and many others that just go on these long-winded rants, either about Trump, Charlie Kirk, or, other competitors within their own field, like Sydney Sweeney in this case. I think that just is very telling. Like, of course, a lot of actors out there, and how they're calling out other actors right now, really just goes to tell you exactly where they are. And I think it just spells that Jane Fonda has a lot of jealousy stirring up within her right now. And you're seeing this from Ruby Rose, you're seeing this from a lot of other actresses and actors out there saying such things about Sydney Sweeney. But again, like I said before, a lot of actors naturally have box office failures on and off. I think that they're just using the facts that Sydney had a couple of failures in a row to kind of use that as a way to hop on that bandwagon of, either poking fun at how she got her roles, or really just saying such nasty things about her appearance and why she's popular or financially stable in Hollywood and successful in Hollywood. It's a very poor argument coming from Jane Fonda and many others like Ruby Rose, but I would love to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.